stories have become simpler in very complex situations. You know, films are the only medium that actually invite other mediums to be a part of their ship. And it's always art that has provided a safe space for expression of thought. Everyone on that set, from your designer to the person doing your lights to the person managing your cameras, is telling that story with you. My voice of artist is just to be authentic to the person you are at that point of time in life.
Hi Megha.
Hi, Megha.
This is so surreal.
It's beautiful. Yes.
We are in Mumbai. The year
Yeah.
is 2024. May I request you to close your eyes for me?
Sure.
Go back to your childhood, the year of your choice. Tell us about the memory that pops up in your head, which is innocence personified.
I think all memories are, you know, when it comes to childhood, are mostly innocence personified. But the time we spend with our grandparents, you know, who take us through this journey of life. Can I open my eyes?
Yes, please.
I was like,
You're seeing it.
I was seeing it, yeah. But I think the time I spent with my grandparents, with my tata and pati, is, you know, probably the most special time I've had in my life. We used to have midnight snacks and honey and butter sandwiches, and there was always it was a lot about snacks and stories. So yeah,
What stories would they tell you?
they would tell me all kinds of stories, like from horror stories to Pearl S. Buck, because they used to read, like, you know, they used to read, we used to get a lot of Reader's Digests at home, to Tamil stories from Kalki magazine. So yeah, I've grown up on folklore and Tata Party stories.
Have those stories somehow become a part of you or your storytelling? Where do you see them coming out now?
Eventually, all stories become a part of you and you become a part of them. So, even when I'm talking to you right now, a part of my history is, you know, interacting with you in terms of the people who brought me up, like my grandparents, especially that childhood glee when I hear another person's name is Megha. So, yeah, I'm definitely very connected to the stories that brought me up.
It is uncanny, and I think this is going to be the theme of our conversation because I have grown up reading Reader's Digests. My father used to order it, and whenever he would travel anywhere for work, he will come back with story books. There was this one story in particular I remember. It was from the book called Sepia. It had a collection of stories.
Right, right.
And there was one story about this girl called Tanju, who was a mountain girl and who would just take her sheep up in the mountains for them to, you know, have a gala of the time. It took me maybe 20 years or so to realize that maybe Tanju is the reason why I love mountains. And then I asked the question, तांजू मुझ में है या मैं ही तांजू हूँ?
आप तांजू हो क्योंकि आप कहानी हो तो.
And then it went like, कौन हूँ मैं?
But that's the beauty of well-told stories, that parts of it become parts of you become part of the story, and then when you are kind of narrating that story to someone else, you process it creatively in a different manner and make it your own. And that's the beauty about the narrative condition, you know, that power of narration is how much you can creatively process something and recite it or tell it to others and make it such an engaging format in general. So yes.
Precisely to do that, to help people realize that they are surrounded by stories and there are so many beautiful ways of articulating it, expressing it, and making others feel the same emotion that you're feeling, is why we created this platform called Voice of Artist. So welcome to Voice of Artist. How are you feeling?
Thank you so much, and congratulations on Voice of Artists. I think it's very important to have a label called Voice of Artists, which sounds like a safe space. It's giving good green flag energy, which is very important in our times. So yeah.
What's the visual or sound that Voice of Artist brings to you?
Yeah, I think it's just, you know, the the loudspeaker of protest in a way, you know, because I think the voice of artists are also often, especially the, you know, kind of governance that voices of artists go through. We do need, like, we do have to cut away from the mainstream to kind of associate our art to a mightier purpose, and for that the routes we take are different. And you know, protest art is something that has risen out of civil disobedience, and it's just so beautiful. All, like, world over, artists who have functioned in this particular format, the multitudes of change they have brought around through their art and through their own ambition for change. So yeah, I think that's what Voice of Artists kind of reminds me of.
In fact, you said it because when we were doing research to find rationale behind this emotion that we were feeling, the need to create a platform, we call ourselves Rebel Collective, and then
Oh.
we figured. Like if Voice of Artist were a story, its logline would be a rebel collective must unlock the artistic energy within everyone while they navigate the world as they know it to create art above chart, a universal artistic movement that builds a better tomorrow. While we were researching on that, we realized Osho has said something similar to what you said. While uh, rebellion can be very literal, but any form of artistic expression actually is a sign of a rebellious energy because you're rebelling when you're creating. What do you have to say about that?
It's unfortunate that we have to rebel to create, you know, and I wish, like, the entire world was a safe canvas for people to just create, because then we won't have this distinction between art and non-art. You know, then the entire world would be like conditioned to be artists and creators, and you know, because we are all born that way. We all are born to be creative, to create, to communicate, to make art as an act of love.
I'll take a segue from this into screenwriting because the rules or structure of screenwriting also derives from how real life in the real world is, which is there's always a beginning and there's always an end. There's always a yin and there's always a yang. There's always a balance of creation and destruction. From that perspective, how do you see the role of conflicts or obstacles in making humanity as a whole, but at the same time, specifically artists, more resilient?
You know, I'd like to give the example of the people of Iran, and especially the cinema coming out of Iran. Out of great adversity comes great richness, you know, and look at what the Makmal Buffs have done. Look at what so many great Iranian filmmakers, including Isluf, who's, you know, who was in Cannes recently, be it Jafar Panahi. So, I mean, Jafar Panahi has made films in house arrest and smuggled them in a cake from Iran to Venice. So yeah, I think with great resistance comes great resistance cinema as well. I mean, and I'm talking only from a cinema perspective, but anywhere in the world, be it literature, be it poetry, you know, whenever there's any kind of censorship, there's a counter culture that thrives around it, that fights for its rights.
Humans have become so complex with time. As the society has evolved, as technology has evolved, as the systems have evolved, words are not being used to express. Roads are not allowing you to travel. With this complexity of our existence, have the stories also become more complex?
I feel like you already answered the question that you were asking me through your own beautiful sentence of roads have become hard to travel. And yes, stories have become simpler in very complex situations, like for example, look at the cinema that is coming out of Palestine, or look at the cinema that is coming out of Ukraine. I saw a couple of films from Ukraine recently, and these are all war-torn areas. So, and it doesn't have to be as drastic as war. It can also be as repressed or as scary for a particular gender or for the LGBTQ community. So I've always, understood that in any kind of storytelling, out of great adversity comes great creativity. And it's always art that has provided a safe space for expression of thought.
The way you have expressed such complex topics in a simple way, what are the odds is a supreme example of how easy breezy it feels when you're watching it, but when you pause and reflect about it, you say, oh my god, Megha has addressed so many complex issues through an innocent character of a child, but seemingly adult human complexions of emotions or processing or accepting themselves. So one way would be to risk protest, as you said, but the responsibility of a filmmaker or art would be, like you said, to express the thought. And the way you have expressed the thought, it has ensured it has reached people and minds.
Young people.
Young people.
Yeah.
So talk to us about the thought you had behind What Are the Odds, because it's such a beautiful film but makes you think so very much.
With What Are the Odds, I had the familiarity of a 16-year-old writing it with me. So we always kept that world very honest. But a lot of these situations and these thoughts were something I had myself as a young person. And I would always ask Shreya Vedya if she connected with them. And she totally did. And so it was just both of us connecting to the authenticity of who we were as young adults, And I was, 34, 35 when I made it, and Shreya was, she wrote it when she was exactly 16. And in films, everything happens. Like 1 year is a long time, 5 years is a long time. You never realize when time passes by. But yes, What Are the Odds it's really what are the odds that a film like What Are the Odds gets to be made in a time like, this. So I think, it had a lot to do with the authenticity of us being children. It also had a lot to do with the authenticity of like the amount of fun we wanted to have at that point of time, because we did want to make a rock and roll film, and we did. Fun is a very important part of my creative process in a way. So, and at that point of time, I was in that phase of life which was probably my darkest, and I said, you know what, I really need to make something that feels like it has a healing energy about it, and at the same time, I don't want it to be too careless. So what can I do at this point of time? And that's how What Are the Odds came around. I mean, that's exactly what happened. And you won't believe this, but a lot of art that we personally create is not to impress anyone, but it's also a part of your own personal healing journey. So no matter what, others think of it, a part of you has healed to be strong enough to make your other piece of, to move on to your next story. So, which was Lalanna's song, which was exactly the opposite of What Are the Odds, but Lalanna's song is probably one of the darkest films I've made. But again, I was in a very, very stable, very happy phase of life where I made it. So it's always, the lightest hour and the darkest hour that dictates where you are when you're creating, for me. And it's interesting.
It is so important for people to notice and take notice of this fact, what you just said. A lot of times people stereotype artists for creating sad things when they are sad and creating happy things when they are happy, but it is not a reflection of what your state of mind is, and that is such a powerful statement, because an art can be interpreted in multiple ways and it can be expressed also in multiple ways.
As it must. There is no rule to art, and art is the only space that's free. Whether it's in your head, whether it's a tactile piece of work, whether it's, art is freedom. And we have to really respect that freedom we get to just create. And we don't realize how lucky we are that we get to do anything at this given point of time. So it's also a very big privilege to kind of be a practitioner of a vocation that is deemed artistic by bystanders or whoever. But I would just call it healing.
How liberating is that? I mean, you have a profession which heals you, and you have a collective of people who get aligned to your vision to bring what you see in your head
I suppose
into
so.
real life.
Yeah.
And you said you wanted to have fun with What Are the Odds?
Yes, we were a very young team. Our DP was 24. I was the oldest in that set, and I was 36. Oh no, probably Abhay, who was our producer. I was managing a bunch of children making a film, and with children you become a child, and they bring out that they have so much love, and they're there to just have fun. There's no performative action, or no one's asking कि अच्छा shot दिया है क्या, कि मेरा makeup ठीक. No, it's just, and Yashaswini and Karanveer, it was their first film, and they were so delightful. And Shreya's writing also was so, like she says such strange things, and I think that oddity about What Are the Odds is what really, and it has made such a difference to the lives of so many young people, especially people who are queer, and people who are young. I still get mails about that film, and I'm like, oh, that feels so nice that you noticed that part. And they're like, yeah, the film had so much kindness about it. I will never forget this mail, this message that I got from the mother of a child with special needs, saying that, my kid and me decided to take a break, and we stumbled across your film, and I've never seen my kid happier. And we danced through all the songs. And then again, I get another message about how a teacher who teaches kids with special needs did a screening of What Are the Odds for the entire class. And those kind of messages just made me happy, because, we were also wondering, releasing a film through a pandemic, is it a good thing? It's a small boutique film. And it just it was like this burst of fresh air in my life. I'll never forget those days of interacting with young people, lonely people, adults, but all odd in their own way. And just like it was just a mayhem of people interacting out of love. Like, I've never heard such love language in India, because it's, so it just felt very, very home. It felt like a familiar nostalgia that you feel when you're around affectionate people, when you're around your grandparents, or when you're around the toys you like the most when you're growing up, So yeah, or the dogs that have raised you.
Your dog also is in the opening scene with Abhay Deol.
Yeah, she, from being an adopting, being a little child at an NGO, she became the next day was her in the lap of Abhay's gorgeous arms. Yeah.
You said feeling nostalgia while doing this, and I think the poet inside of you just came out, because nostalgia in the present is such a complex feeling, and it's such a beautifully painful feeling.
Isn't it?
How does that affect, in a good or bad way, you will tell us, your writing? How much or less do you empathize with your characters?
I mean, I have this habit of having a lot of empathy for even the most cruel characters I write. Like, for example, the girls of Lalanna's song.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an abundance of evil out there, but there's so much of fragility and gentleness in the way they've been written as female characters. And I think that's because all of us are Lalannas for me at this point of time, and the cumulative tragedy of what happens,
Should have been rescued and comforted.
That day, yeah. So that for me was very important. I mean, there are no villains. I think situation is the biggest villain in any story I write. Or it's just circumstance that makes us horrible people. And I like to kind of get into the circumstances to what made this person react this way, to this situation. So it's like I like to do a bit of back profiling into their lives and, do like a cause effect of, acha aap aise the, isliye, there has to be, yeah. So I like that kind of character building.
Because reality is such. I mean, no one's life is linear, and there will be situations which will bring out the best of you, or there will be situations that will bring out the worst of you. So you're going back to the why did someone become, or why did a character become what it eventually became.
Yes. I mean, pushing a child off a cliff is probably the biggest low that you have ever had to go through in life,
We watched it, and there are so many layers that Megha is trying to communicate with us. There's gender diversity, there's cultural inequality, there is self-doubt, there is this vulnerability as an adult, but you feel like you're a child, and then, oh my God, I mean...
Yeah. So again, Lalanna's song was written in one of the more calmer stages of my life, and it's probably one of the more darker films I've written and directed,
Why did you want to tell that story?
Because I really connected to that story. I mean, also, we have different stories in us, okay? And after you make a film like What Are the Odds, you're only expected to write one kind of a story, which is a young adult story. And that word quirky became too quintessential to my identity. And I'm like, okay, it's not exactly a bad deal, but what is quirky? मुझे ही नहीं समझ आता है कि ये word क्या है, because we're Indians, we are not used to having being called quirky as a part of our character profiles, and then suddenly oh, she's quirky.
Unorthodox is the word used.
I don't understand this word. I want to be able to identify with it, so let me experiment with another film. And am I quirky?
Megha, in both your films, Lalanna's Song and What Are the Odds, you have used the medium of cinema to bring other art forms also at the forefront. Music is such an important part of both the films. And that reminds me of this book called Medici Effect by Franz Johansson, where he talks about how innovation lies at intersections of different things. And that makes me think creativity also lies at intersections. At the same time, it can bring a lot of different mediums together.
It's supposed to, and I think the more mediums that come together to create a final output, the more exciting it is, but it's also what the medium or the story demands. The visuals dictate a lot, the music dictates, so I think everything becomes a part of a story. And I particularly am very interested in music. I mean, I don't perform music, but I have a very keen, because I've grown up on a lot of music. I've been around music a lot. So, जैसे घर में ना बहुत माहौल था, like music and art का. So automatically that tuning in is there. Ki I will lean into something that gives me music. So my collaborations with music directors, for example, with Sneha Khanwalkar, or be it Sagar Desai, or be it any music director I've worked with, they've always turned out to be very exciting. But as far as, again, I was telling you that this intersectional quality of creativity, I would particularly like to talk about this intersectional quality of about films. Films are the only medium that actually invite other mediums to be a part of their ship to make an entire story. So, and that's the most welcoming part. I think that's the only reason I didn't become a bad novelist and became a filmmaker instead. Because I was like, if I do films, I not only get to write, I get to have a visual structure, I get to write dialogues, I get to have empathy for people, I get to be on a set working with people, I get to collaborate, which is the greatest joy of making a film, because it's never one person's idea. It's not it's never a director. And anyone will know that. Anyone who calls like a director the ultimate,
Captain of the ship.
It's never that. It's always parts of the ship that make the captain. Like, there's no captain of the ship, if you ask me. It's the captain of the ship's duty is just to, and that's basically their duty, to get the most coherent answer to their query through their departments that have come together to, especially in independent films, people come together to put together a vision, and it's genuine. It's the joy of genuine collaboration, and why not? We should have that. Like, we should have that when it comes to good production design, good costume design, good like, for example, my costume design is never about acha to kar le. No, Smriti and me, we always discuss palettes, and we're always like, Vivek's jacket and what are the odds. I literally sent her the color of a fallen leaf, a yellow leaf at that point of time, on a black and white this thing of paper, and I said, look at this palette, isn't it lovely? And she sent me back more leaves, saying, wo wala yellow nahi, ye wala yellow. So I was like, huh. So yeah, so a lot of it's also very, the process is very romantic. Even if it's the darkest film you're making, there's a lot in it for the filmmaker. There's no, like, it's suffering for others, but for the filmmaker, it's a very fulfilling process, because you're literally watching your story come alive through the essence of others, through like the essence of these great actors who are essaying something you've written. And I had the pleasure of working with like Parvati, Reema, Abhay, like, and they're all such great actors, and you take back so much from them, which is why when I get very flummoxed when they call film just like a director's medium. It's not. It's a storyteller's medium, and everyone on that set, from your designer to the person doing your lights to the person managing your cameras, is telling that story with you. So they're your story writers in a way. They're painting that, canvas with you.
What you just described gave me a visual from one of my poems, actually, where I had written about how I leave pieces of me behind for the people to take it to places where I have never been.
Oh, I just love that. I love the idea of it so much.
And there's so much of physics in it also.
Yeah.
And that's again another...
That's probably the second law of thermodynamics, where you will have to die, exist in chaos, people will take you as matter, pass it across.
Quantum physics. Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
My atoms will pass on to you, and you will go somewhere.
And we'll all exist in chaos through the emitting matter of you. So
thank you for understanding it, because...
Call a physicist to your funeral, that's what it said.
But that's exactly what you said in a simpler way, that as a director of any film, you pass on your wisdom and your knowledge and the way you will handle a situation to your team, and you exist through them.
And then you take their wisdom and knowledge and then pretend it's all yours in the next film you make. And I'm like, yeah, I know the light hack to this one. And they're like, oh my God.
What you're saying very lightly is so important, because you're learning and evolving and collectively evolving.
Of course.
And for a director to know the technicalities of the set is also so important.
Of course. And as and I'm a writer, I'm not even a director. मैं तो fluke में director बन गई, because at some point of time I was like, if either a very bad director can come out of making my films, or a very good director. So I was like, let me try, because and I wrote Bunny and I did not know how to direct it. And कुछ भी कर दिया मैंने जब मैं Bunny बना रही थी. वो छोटी थी, around 26, 25. Until then I was a writer. I was like, मस्त है ना, शैतान लिखी है और young adult वाली violence वाली films लिखेंगे. And then I'm like, but what, and by the time you're 26, 27, you're like, where are you? Where do you belong in this world? And how did you get here? And what is it that, what is your universal question and query? And that's when I realized my soul lies in experimentation. And when I say experimentation, it doesn't mean shooting in 16 roll through like burnt cigarette butts or
Not for
anything
the
like
sake
that.
of it.
No, I mean that is experimentation too. It's just that I haven't had the access to shooting in that kind of format. But for me, true experimentation comes in fearless storytelling, which doesn't specifically follow a type or a template, to put it that way. And I'm more comfortable doing non-template work than doing template work.
Why?
Template work gives me anxiety because there's something that's been set out there. But template work is what pays the bills, But the more of the template I go, and the more I know I've broken these rules, the happier I get, because that's the kind of self-healing that you have to do.
There are some films which you will want to watch and rewatch and watch 100 times.
Yes. Yeah, any Sai Paranjpe film is a film I can rewatch, or a Rishikesh Mukherjee film. But if I have to live in a film, then that film would be Cold War by Pavel Pawlowski for me. Yeah.
But as a writer and a director, what is your perspective on how to make a film rewatchable? Like how do you technically and emotionally bring rewatchability to a film? Because yes, there are films which we will want to rewatch, but there are some films which we call one-time watch, or you can just not make yourself watch again. You enjoy it when you watch it.
Yeah.
So what is this rewatchability factor technically as a writer and director?
It's something I haven't ever paid attention to, to be honest with you. But apparently, one of these, the first film I wrote, Shaitan, has gained that status of being a very rewatched and revisited and loved cult classic of some sort, especially because of, the way Bijoy directed the film, etc. So we never thought ki dekh apan kal film likhenge, or it'll have a shelf life. But yeah, it happens. I'll tell you what makes films rewatchable for me.
Sure.
Is nostalgia, of course, or is who you were at that point of time when you were watching the film. Like there's this film by Xavier Dolan called Matthias and Maxime, and I was very tender at that point of time. It's a beautiful love story between these two lovely boys called Matthias and Maxime, and it's such a tender love story. And Xavier Dolan is such a great director. He's so young, so precious. He's Canada's national treasure. Okay,
Yeah.
Anyway, but the film he made was so particular to me at that point of time of my life that I'll always associate a certain romance, a certain loneliness, and remember that film. Certain films evoke a certain tragedy or a certain drama in you, in a good way that reminds you of who you were.
So it could be nostalgia, it could be comfort, it could be rediscovering yourself.
It could be definitely. I want to remember me, and I want to remember how tender I felt at this point of time while I was watching this film, or how sexy I felt, or how I projected or mirrored that part of the film into a relationship I was going through at that point of time. So yeah, it's all that. And how I enjoyed that romance. So I go back to that film, craving that romance in a way. So yeah, it's all that.
One perspective that we've got, not about this question because this is the first time I'm asking this question to you, but how films resonate with a larger population while it is written or thought of by one person. Is the concept of myths. There are these larger myths that run in the universe, I would say, not even society.
Yeah.
And Joseph Campbell, who this hero's journey, basically the mono myths that he created, and how George Lucas was the first person to actually bring that to screen.
Activate the mono
myth. And because it resonates, and like you said, it touches some part of our human existence in different ways. The same thing touches us differently.
Yeah.
Is why we relate with it, and is why we keep going back to it.
Yeah.
I do want to appreciate I think it was the first shot, one of the few first shots of the film where they are in the car and they are going up the stairs.
Yeah.
It's a one-take shot, if I'm
It's a
not
one-take
wrong.
shot, yes.
And isn't that generally a director's dream to get one-take?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So we built a rig around it. My DP, who's my amazing collaborator, Kuldeep Mamanya, a wonderful young boy, he built a rig where he basically just placed it on the stilts. Then we went inside the car. Then he walked through the stairway, and I was just with the camera with this thing down. But it's all his genius.
Seamless.
Yeah, it was a magnetic rig that just came from here, and he carried it like fearlessly, duk 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 duk. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
I want to segue now into poetry.
Oh, tell me.
What is poetry to you?
Right now is poetry to me. Everything is poetry if you want it to be. And everything can be the opposite of poetry if you want it to be, So poetry is what you decide to be at that particular moment in time. And yeah, most of the time I'm trying to be as blanketed by poetry as possible, because it really eases my life, like the words of others, the lives of others, the experiences of others. When Mary Oliver tells me, to listen to the sound of the wild geese, I make it. There are these little rites of passage that poetry brings into our life, It makes us see dawn in a special way. It makes us see daylight in a special way. It gives us a worldview that really teaches you about life, and it breaks something in you, it makes something in you. Yeah, so and poetry doesn't have to necessarily be in the form of poems or verse. It is life in itself. Poetry is a physical form of life if you allow it to be.
I had once written a line which went like, sing the song you're here to sing, truly and unflinchingly be you. So that be you part, which can be so difficult at times, but if we find the courage to be ourselves, if we do our part in creating that ecosystem which lets us be ourselves, is how we can sing the song we are here to sing, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah. And then, there's the Chinese proverb that goes, there's a Chinese myth that goes that there was this artist who disappeared into his own art to escape the world. So you're also creating portals for not only the world to escape into, but also for your own, transcendence to save yourself from everything that's going on. So I think, yeah.
What is your voice of artist?
My voice of artist is just to be authentic to the person you are at that point of time in life. It doesn't matter. You have to give yourself space to evolve as a human being, I may be What Are the Odds like 5 years ago, but I'm not, I'm Lalanna's song 5 years later. So it happens, you have to, the voice of an artist is very deeply connected to the time of the artist, And I wish people will understand that spatio-temporal relationship between your voice and the times you're living that voice through. And it's such an important symbiotic relationship, because the times dictate your voice, the times reason your existence, Your brain prioritizes storytelling in a certain manner, which to a very large extent is dictated by the time that it perceives. So yes.
Look at the camera and tell these budding artists how to do this, just this what you described.
For the budding artists, I would just say be very aware of the times that dictate what your art is as well, and make you feel vulnerable, make you feel strong, make you feel in love, make you feel all sorts of things, but just be authentic to that voice, because your time is important, your present is important, and time is all we have, to observe you, and this voice will hold on for generations to come. and it will create history. So yeah, you are the voice of history.
Beautifully put. To wrap this conversation, I want you to go back to that.
To the closing eye.
The Megha you channelized at that time, who would listen to stories with her grandparents.
Yeah.
What would that version of you tell to you today? What would she say to you today?
Aren't we lucky we had this time? You know, that's what I would tell myself, that I am so lucky and I am so aware of the privilege I had, because there are so many families, there are so many people who may not have had the privilege of that time with, you know, two kind people who had the time to tell their grandchild a story. So I feel very lucky and very honored by their presence that continues in spite of, you know, their mortal remains being unavailable. But that's another voice in my head. You know, every time I feel a little low. And recently I was talking to my therapist about this. I was like, and I was feeling particularly low. And she was like, you know, you must remember that you've had like a bunch of great people in your life as well. And I was like, yes, you know, my grandfather. And she was like, why don't you channel that voice for some time and let me know how you feel? And yeah, it was just so emotional for me. And like, what is my old grandfather? He knew nothing about films. He knew nothing about anything. We would take a bus, go to the zoo because it was free entertainment. You know, we could never afford like super things. But as this old tata, the kind of things he's done for his granddaughter without having like big means to money or luxury or anything. I mean, I really value that support that he gave to a child, you know, that enabled her to do what she's doing today, you know, and also being that safe space for others.
Thank you for coming to Voice of Artists. It was a
so
pleasure
much.
having
Yes.
you. Thanks, Megha.
Thanks, Megha. And thank you to your wonderful crew as well for being with us today.
It's a
Yes.
pleasure. Thank you.